Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, the podcast focusing on real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined as always by Derek Brissett. Derek, what do you make of the rugby that was happening in Europe this weekend as we prepare for the World Cup that'll be happening over the Thanksgiving weekend here in Canada?
Oh yeah, it's gonna be exactly. October is gonna be wild. It's gonna be a super busy month, obviously. We obviously got a World Cup. We got a few Canada matches, although not all the Canada matches we were hoping for. We'll get
we will be getting into that in just a second.
Basically, the rugby that happened in Europe, the Saracens are the best team in the world, as they have proven time and time again. So yeah, definitely not a close one. If you're a Harlequins fan, I hope you have a defibrillator handy. Wherever it is you are watching their games at. They're probably the most exciting team in the league right now, just because, there's always insane comebacks or like really close games or guys flying over the corner flag for a try. So I find those games really good. How did the Ospreys do? I need my weekly Ospreys update. Yeah.
Well, the Ospreys started their season with a draw. Last week they had a 1-point loss, but this time around they finally got their first win of the season, a monumental win over the Glasgow Warriors. A little bit of a slip up towards the end, letting in 2 tries after they'd already secured the bonus point victory. But, it's a young squad. You make these mistakes and hopefully you only make them once and not again. But, the URC, Wales currently at the top of the Welsh Shield, as it's known. So currently on track to make it into the Champions Cup next year. The Champions Cup hasn't even begun this year, so maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, they're on the right track. So
that's good. Also, you got to give, speaking of the URC, we got to give that shout out to that loose head prop that crushed a 50-22 kick for Zebra. I can't remember who it is. That was his first game. I remember reading that it was his first game, but I'm blanking on the name right now. But
what an impression to make! Absolutely,
that was nasty. So that was a lot of fun rugby stuff going on this week. So
I guess we should turn our attention back across the Atlantic and talk about rugby or the lack thereof in Canada at the moment, because it was announced on America's Rugby News last week that the Canada versus All Blacks 15 game has been cancelled. Now, within the article, there's no indication of which side has pulled out, but it was announced in a press release for the All Blacks 15 that they had secured their fixtures against the Barbarians and what appeared to be an Ireland 15 or an Irish team. Let me just have a quick scan of that, because of course we always do our research before the show.
That's our whole thing. We do the research.
Yeah, we do the research and then we forget it and then we have to confirm it. Yeah, unfortunately no fixture this coming October.
No test match officially.
Yeah.
They're playing Brazil and Chile in those 15 games, I guess.
Yeah. So, it's been confirmed that the All Blacks 15 will be playing a game against Ireland on the 4th of November at the RDS Arena in Dublin, and will be playing the Barbarians at Tottenham Stadium in London the Saturday following that. So that'll be the 13th of November. So, no October game that has been listed for the All Blacks 15. There was also mentioned in the America's Rugby News article that a game against Argentina 15 fell through as well. So it does seem to be a case of logistics, things just haven't worked out. But also mentioned in the article is that at this point in time, Rugby Canada has no confirmed men's 15s matches for the autumn international window. Now, this may be a case of, saving resources. Obviously, the Women's World Cup is about to start and you want to keep all eyes on that. And the way that tournament is going, it's looking as though Canada are going to be one of the teams that will be hopefully making it to the Final Four. And therefore, that means there'll be games in November that would overlap with the men's 15s. And, ideally, you want to have all eyes on a World Cup. So possibly, it may just be, best intentions haven't worked out, as we can clearly see from this Canada versus All Blacks 15 fixture not coming through. But a announced game against the Netherlands, that now seems to be off as well. So, yeah, it's troubling to say the least,
Well,
but it is what it is, unfortunately.
yeah, I think it's also important to note that also when we were talking about that Brazil Chile America's Rugby Trophy setup, that Canada was the one country that was pushing for those to be uncapped games. So I
Mm.
guess those could have been test matches, but I guess Canada didn't want to do that, which I think last week when we were talking about it, we were theorizing, hypothesizing, I suppose, that the reason that they wanted it to be uncapped was because all the big guns were going to be on hand for this all black 15 game. So now that that's not the case, it's kind of makes it more peculiar, I guess, why they don't want it to be uncapped unless they're that worried about sliding further down the world rankings, I guess. I don't know.
Mm.
But it's yeah, so that makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
It's I mean, I think ultimately at the end of the day, like, it's not every year that as Canadian fans we get a all black branded team
Mm.
in Canada. And the fact that I guess it was kind of was it actually officially announced, or did Rugby Canada like officially announce it, or was it just kind of like because they haven't even really officially said that it was canceled. I'm trying to
No,
remember
well,
if it was like it got all like reported that it was going to happen.
yeah, so it
Versus
was reported by the All Blacks, well, Rugby New Zealand on the All Blacks 15 website that a fixture was
early.
happening in Canada. And because it was happening in October, it was outside of the international test window for
Hmm.
the end of the year tests.
Oh, so I guess
So,
other games would be too.
so yeah, it was technically out of World Rugby's area of interest. So
Yeah.
uh, and actually, speaking of the America's Rugby Trophy tournament, it's also been confirmed that Uruguay will be hosting the senior, or like the second senior, I should say, sides of Uruguay, USA, and Argentina. And these
Interesting.
fixtures that seem to be happening at the same time, or roughly the same time, I should say, as the America's uh, Camp Rugby Trophy. So it does. So it's
The
basically all the
USA?
teams of the former America's Rugby Championship in two pools, and it's none of their fully capped teams. It's all the
Wait.
senior second teams. So the
Wait.
USA Falcons, Uruguay 15, and Argentina 15
Mhm.
as
When's the
well.
repechage tournament for the
The
USA?
repechage tournament, that I believe is in November as well.
November.
Again, we do our research. We totally do our research. I don't know why anyone would dare think
Hey, it's
that
the
we.
Canadian rugby podcast. I'm
Yeah,
not worried
yeah,
about
we're
when the
not in this
Eagles
World
play.
Cup, so who
Yeah,
cares about
I'm
it?
not.
It doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. It
Yeah,
never
exactly. I'm
happened.
not worried about when the Eagles play. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Let me have a quick gander. I
Well,
believe it's been announced those fixtures are for November.
oh,
So well, that makes sense. It
but you just
obviously,
said it's
if
the
a World Rugby
Falcons though.
a
Anyway,
World Rugby planned tournament happens within their set designed
yeah,
release window, of course it can happen.
that's going to be an interesting tournament to watch too. Either way, back to I think the point that we were trying to make here.
Yes.
So I think I guess knowing that we don't really get that many opportunities to see all black branded teams playing in Canada, it's it's obviously a little disappointing, but I think, like I said last week, like, I mean, last week when we were kind of talking about it before this news kind of broke, I was very concerned about the fact that tickets aren't on sale and there's no venue announced. And
Yeah.
I guess we kind of found out why. On one hand, it kind of stinks because it'd be cool to see like an all black team, but on the other hand, Canada probably would have got smoked, and I don't know how much they need that right now,
Yeah.
given everything around surrounding Rugby Canada and like an organization that's clearly in like a major transition. I mean, even looking at their social media, they're putting up job postings on what seems like every like week or 2 weeks right now too. So um there's obviously a lot of change happening there, and I wonder if all that change is kind of impacting the impacting like the competition
Yeah.
schedule, things like that too.
Yeah.
um
It
as,
may even
as we
be
kind of
a
start to figure out what what's going on with Rugby Canada going forward. It does make the teams that are going to go to South America a little bit more interesting too, though, because obviously, despite the fact that it's not going to be capped matches, you'd imagine a lot of the big guns are going to go down. Like, I mean, maybe not guys playing in Europe because it's not going to be a capped game.
Absolutely not.
But the guys playing in Europe don't play capped games.
Yeah, exactly that as well. But as in, that should now be like, you've run out of excuses. Get these guys that haven't been capped before to play a bit. Get names and faces out there. Just increase your.
But they're not going to be capped if they play
exactly. But
right,
exactly.
Which was our argument last week, is that the game should have been capped. But
yeah, well, anyway, let's keep it in Canada. Canada and South America for a second, because an interesting rumor is circulating. I want to emphasize rumor. Nothing has been confirmed as of recording, which means that it has probably been confirmed after recording. You know how the show goes. But down in South America, they have SLAR, which is Super League Americana de Rugby, which is the Southern Hemisphere or Southern American version of MLR, to put it in as general terms as possible. And Paul Tate, part of America's Rugby News, has tweeted out that the rumors are saying that Cafeteros Pro, which is the Colombian side, is out to be replaced by an Argentinian side in Tucumán, but also included in SLAR 2023 are the American Raptors, which are based in Glendale. You may know them as the Colorado Raptors or the Glendale Raptors as well, but they're currently the America Raptors. And the Pacific Pride, which is Rugby Canada's developmental side as well. And following up with this, Brian Ray, also with America's Rugby News, tweeted out, "I'm told to expect an announcement from Rugby Canada soon. I have no idea how the logistics are going to work. Significant financial support is coming from World Rugby." And then there have been a few replies about this. And Brian Ray goes on to say why these teams have been chosen for SLAR instead of MLR. And he points out the MLR team is significantly more expensive. There's a franchise fee, there's higher pay, there's way more staff involved. But as for this thing, no idea what the plan is yet for travel or housing, but would think that will eat up an awful lot of the budget. So as I said, this is a rumor. There's nothing guaranteed. There's no confirmation. The evidence does seem that there is support from World Rugby at this point, but we'll be waiting for that Rugby Canada announcement. And if that is publicized on social media, we will retweet it, reblog it, whatever it comes out as. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be invested in it. I'm guessing the Pacific Pride are getting no off season whatsoever.
Yeah, they play a lot of games, which is probably good, maybe for a development team.
Good for developing players, not so much for muscle recovery and things like that.
I'm sure they've got it figured out. So what's your initial reaction to this?
If this was to come to pass, for the America's Raptors, this seems to have been something that they've wanted ever since they left MLR,
which I still don't really understand.
Yeah, I know it doesn't make sense from our perspective, but Glendale's its own little bubble, so
yeah, I guess so.
Whatever. But Pacific Pride, now obviously getting the Pride players to play more games, especially against tougher opponents, in a more professional atmosphere and environment, that's obviously great news. What it seems to be is that the structure would probably revert back to being a home and away schedule like it was supposed to be in 2020. For the past two seasons, it has been it's been home and away, but it's been in like specific locations. So I think in Chile and Uruguay.
Yeah.
So now it'll be reverting back to a home and away structure. It's also over a much larger area than MLR as well,
because it's a significantly larger area for.
No, and this is before talking about adding a Canadian and American team. I mean, there's
is it a larger area? I feel like Canada, like
I think Canada is pretty big, but in the sense of teams
furthest
are far further away than they are. Like you're more likely to get to another MLR team across the same distance than you would be to get an SLAR team.
Yeah.
So I think that if World Rugby hadn't been supporting this, because that seems to be what Brian Ray's been saying about significant financial support coming through from World Rugby. If they hadn't done this wouldn't be a question. I don't think it would happen. Like, obviously, we've heard the rumors of the joining fee for an MLR team is $25 million. And that's not even bringing into the accounts of stadium rental, media deals, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So
pro sports is not cheap.
Well, yeah, someone's got to pay up, unfortunately. And yeah, the Pacific Pride, they would be most likely playing home games at Starlight Stadium.
See, though, would they?
Well, that's the thing. But I think that's my question. The same financial commitment to then have teams based in South America for a minimum of 10 weeks and then having
okay. So that's my question, because I know you follow SLAR like how more than I do, but like how long is their season normally?
Well, again, because the only seasons they've completed have been truncated because of COVID. It's 10 weeks from start to finish. But if it was to revert to the original model that was set out in 2020, is that the first 5 rounds would be first set of fixtures, and then the second set of round would be like the reverse fixtures. So if you played home against one of the Argentinian teams in round 1, you'd play them as an away fixture in round 6. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Like, I think, I guess as the Brian Ray's tweet pointed out, like I'd be very curious to see what the logistics of this are, especially with, as you just mentioned, home and away games, because that is quite the trip. That's quite the trip for like a South American club team to make too, up to like Canada or up to Colorado, right?
Yeah.
I think like ultimately, like I don't know, it does feel kind of weird having 2 North American teams in the South American competition, but it feels about just as weird as South African teams playing in the URC, which is happening right now. I think, like, I guess my initial, I kind of have 2 thoughts. I think I would rather see the Pacific Pride and even the Raptors kind of playing in like almost like a minor league rugby sort of system, like playing games against like other MLR. Like I don't think like the Pacific Pride should be in Major League Rugby. I think that's kind of a thing that certain, like a national team development program I don't think should necessarily be there. But if they were like a minor league system where you have like the development team playing other teams, like the academies from like the Arrows or New England or Houston or whoever else has an academy now, plus you can mix the Raptors in and kind of have a more formalized competition within that group. But that's not really a thing that completely exists yet. So I guess SLAR. The one thing though that I think might be good with SLAR and stuff too is at the end of the day, right? Like the Pacific Pride is the Rugby Canada national teams development program, right? So it's like the idea of it is that guys play for the Pride and then move up to the national team. Right. And I think like part of that experience, I think, which might be good, is like, obviously I think part of that experience is, you get the you get the proper coaching and stuff. You build your skills with, you work on your hands, work on tackling, work on, your kicking or whatever it is. Right. But I think part of that might also be like how to act like a pro when you get to the national team as well, right? And I think like maybe the idea of like here, like if you're going to play on the national team, it's like, yeah, here's a basically we're going to go play club teams, but here's like a simulated tour of South America.
Yeah.
Of like, yeah, this is what it would look like if you played for the national team and the national team had to go play, spend 3 weeks in South America playing Uruguay, Chile, and Brazil.
Yeah.
Right. And this is how this would go. And then you can kind of do that with the pride. And maybe I'm sure like off the top of my head, I know like a lot of guys for the pride have played like U20s or whatever and have some international experience, but it might just be like a little added benefit. So I can kind of see that. But I think like one, like obviously the funding, which I'm curious to see what World Rugby is actually putting into it and stuff, and just like the general logistics, I think like I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it just like does kind of feel to me, it feels a little weird. And I would like a little bit more information on how this is actually going to work before really passing a judgment. But I can see a benefit of having the pride fly down and do a little tour of South America, even if it's part of a little organized competition.
Yeah. But again, this is all rumors at this point. So by the time this episode comes out, it's been announced and a detailed plan has been explained. Fingers crossed.
But, which is going to happen on Tuesday.
It always does. Of course. We all know.
It always does.
We all know how this song and dance goes.
Yeah. Just like Lucas Rumball signing. Should we talk about that now? Because we didn't talk about it last week.
Yeah. Well, that's speaking of things that came out on Tuesday. So we are bringing it back to Canada, back to Toronto specifically, because the vice captain has re-signed, which now makes both vice captains and the captain for 2022 have re-signed for 2023 with the Arrows. Lucas Rumball is back for more. He's got more breakdown steals than I think certain teams have at this point, and I think nearly what was it, like 29 more than Tommy De La Vega, who sits second for breakdown steals.
Lucas Rumball's breakdown steal numbers are absolutely absurd compared to the rest of the league. Yeah, it's comedic, really. Like it's
yeah. I mean, we're laughing. I'm not sure the other teams are, but
well,
Arrow number one has been here since the very start in 2019, and great to see him back. Also announced this last week that is returning is Mason Flesch, who unfortunately had his season truncated with an ACL injury, required surgery. Hopefully he's been on the mend, getting better, but that injury basically ended his MLR season. And Mason, tall guy, great guy to have in the forwards. You need these young tall players that Mike Shepherd can rely on to get the ball in the line out instead of himself. So yeah, definitely great to see Mason back along with Rumball. Obviously, knowing us, there's going to be a slew of other signings that will happen between now and when this podcast is released, because that's just how this song and dance goes. But we do have to announce a departure from the Arrows faithful, and that is news of a trade, because Cole Keith will be traded to New England in return for salary cap consideration. So unlike Andrew Quattrin, who got traded to Utah and then traded from Utah back to New England, Cole Keith, straight trade to New England. Cole even reached out to us on Instagram. Thank you for the lovely message. And this isn't the end. We're going to be interviewing you as well. We're also going to be cheering you on when you come back to Toronto for...
Whoa. Not when he comes back to Toronto.
No, cheering him. Game. No. Cheering him as he comes onto the pitch. And that's it.
Yeah, every other game's fine. Not when he's back in Toronto.
But
Cole Keith, though, first player we ever had on the podcast.
Yeah, and we're obviously very great.
He came on after, was it you or Dan that said Detroit should play on the wing?
Seeing as he's not here to defend himself, I'm going to say Dan.
Oh, was it? Okay, yeah, all right, fine. That's we'll go with you know what? I'll believe that. I don't remember. I remember it was one of you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, sure. Yeah, it was Dan. Definitely Dan. No one
Yeah,
else.
exactly. So he came on, and that was the he came on to
Set the record straight
set the
of
record
his
straight that that's
sprinting
a terrible idea.
capabilities. Yeah.
And also that he is apparently is much faster than him. And yeah, so that was a good time. And I think we had him on another time since then too. And
Yeah. When it was down in Atlanta as well.
Down in
so now we need to. So we've had
basically
one of him back home, one of him in Atlanta. Now we need to interview him when he's down in New England.
New England.
I think that's only fair and reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. We need to do a massive New England like round table, but I don't know if we can. I don't know how a 14-person podcast is going to sound.
Well,
might be.
You say that. I think it's now time to have the discussion with the New England Free Jacks to be renamed the New England Mounties.
I was going to say, as you know, what it really should be, much like how we have one national team development program on the West Coast called Pacific Pride. These guys are basically Atlantic Pride now.
Yeah, I suppose so. So let's go through the list of Canadians for the Free Jacks as reported at this present time. So we have Josh Larson,
captain,
obviously, Regan O'Gorman, Foster DeWitt, Isaac Olson, Mr. 2 tries a game, Jack Reeves is Canadian eligible, even though he is playing in England at this present time with Gloucester. Ethan Fryer, Connor Young, and then the aforementioned Andrew Quattrin and Cole Keith. And according to Brian Ray of America's Rugby News, there are more to come. So we're basically on the verge of having 2 Canadian franchises in MLR, I think.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, we just have to. All that's left is for the Canadian military to go down and take over Massachusetts and officially make it part of Canada. Essentially, I think that's the only part that we're missing. No, it's kind of wild. It's obviously like. This is obviously the most Canadians that has been on an American MLR team. And I guess if they're adding to it. So, I mean, it's nice to see, Tom Kinley, I guess, really doing a lot of scouting north of the border, I guess. And it seems to be working out. I wonder, I also kind of wonder like how much of an influence a Canadian captain has on,
obviously, I think it's the word of mouth that's helping out as well. Because
it doesn't hurt that they're a really good team too.
Yeah, it's a shame we don't have the team list of the 2019 Seattle Seawolves, because I think they have the record for most Canadians in a non-Canadian MLR team.
But I feel like it was only like 5 or something though.
Yeah, we'll reach out. We'll reach out to James Dealey, and he'll be able to correct us. Mr. Stats, MLR Stats man, who's
give me a second and I'll figure it out. What 20?
Right. Whilst you're figuring out that, I'm gonna keep it back in Toronto because we have some local rugby news in terms of the McCormick Cup, which happened this weekend just past between Barmy Beach and Toronto Scottish, and the final score was Toronto Scottish 23. Barmy Beach 24. What a game. 1 point is the difference, and the Barmy Beach win the McCormick Cup. This is the Beach's 16th McCormick Cup and the first since 2015. For all you Arrows fans, playing for Toronto Scottish included Marcelo Wainwright, and former 2020 Arrow Dylan Young was playing for the Beach. So congratulations to Barmy Beach on winning the McCormick Cup. And it's just been a great season for the Beach, up the beach, as they say. And looking forward to now having to retain the McCormick Cup for 2023.
All right. So the 2019 Seawolves had 8 Canadians on them.
All right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, you're correct. At this moment in time, the Free Jacks have the largest number of Canadians or Canadian eligible.
How many Canadians
players.
have the Arrows officially re-signed?
It's
been a lot of.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. I know that's not what time, because that's the thing. We'll get more announcement as we approach the 2023 season. And remember, a lot of the new guys that have signed are also Canadian eligible as well.
True. Who were the 9 Canadians on Seattle in 2019?
Don't know. And
you don't even want to hazard a guess?
I'll
give you an easy start. One of them was a podcast guest.
I know, that's why I'm drawing a blank, because he was a former Osprey as well.
Yes.
Jeff Hassler.
Yeah. There you go.
Jeff Hassler and assorted others.
Assorted others. Wow. Not even a try.
No. Well, we've still got a lot to get through on the podcast, so I think now's as good a time as ever to move on before I embarrass myself any further. So we've been talking about laws of the game, rugby union, the 15 in the past. And so we've talked about the pitch and the playing area. We've talked about the ball and the ball specifics. And now we're going to talk about the team. And so before we get into this isn't actually part of the laws, but I think a lot of new fans of rugby union see players with numbers on the back of their kits. They're not entirely sure what these numbers mean, and people keep throwing out names and words of who they're meant to be and what they're supposed to do. So we're going to give you a quick go through of all the players, the overview of what they do, what their numbers mean, and what certain phrases mean. So to begin with, we just want to say that each team starts with 15 players in the playing area. 8 of them are designated as the forwards, and 7 of them are designated as the backs. So we have the forwards and backs. Derek, do you want to talk about the forwards, or do you want to talk about the backs?
Sure. I know nothing about being a back, so I guess being a forward seems to be the way to go.
All right. Take it away with player number 1.
All right. So basically, as you said, Stu, that unlike other sports, the numbers that players wear in rugby actually correlate to the position that they play. So the forwards wear jersey numbers 1 through 8. Basically, they're broken up into 3 sections. You got the front row, second row, and back row. So the front row consists of a loose head prop, who's number 1. 2 is a hooker. 3 is a tight head prop. So obviously, they're the first guys that are in the scrum. They are also so essentially, they're the front row in the scrum. The hooker also is going to be the guy that throws the ball in at the lineouts. And the props are also going to be the guys that usually do a lot of the lifting in the lineouts. Not the only guys that lift in the lineouts, but they're generally there. And essentially, the thing that makes their position really unique is that you kind of need them to play. Like literally need them to play. If in the event that all 6 of your front row players or if in the event that you don't have enough front row players in order to actually to form a full scrum, the game has to actually go to uncontested scrums just because of how specialized the being in the front row of the scrum is with the actual engage of the scrum. So that's kind of the more interesting part of the part of their position. Every other position you can lose as many scrum halves or 8 men or locks as you want, but if you start losing the front row guys, then that actually changes the game a little bit. Props, simply they're called props because they prop up the hooker. The hooker's in the middle of the scrum. He's called a hooker because he hooks the ball back with his foot. If you're looking at the way a scrum is set up, behind the front row is the second row. Those are called locks, where number 4 and 5 they get the name because they lock in the scrum. It's really creative. Get it? It's the props prop a guy up, a hooker hooks something, and a lock something. It's all really specifically creative names. So they kind of, depending on who those players are, they're obviously a big factor. A lot of the power in the scrum kind of comes from them too. Often a lot of them kind of will be the jumpers in the lineup, but some of them aren't. It kind of really depends on the play style and kind of the play style of each of the individual player. So the back row consists of 2 flankers and a number 8. Again, the super creative names because the flankers are obviously on the flank, and the number 8 wears number 8. So creativity shining through there. basically you have an open side flanker and a blind side flanker that correlates to wherever the scrum is. One player is going to be set up on the open side, so obviously, so meaning more field available. One flanker will be on the blind side. Blind side flanker typically wears 6. Open side flanker typically wears 7. Depending on where the scrum is on the field, they'll switch sides. These are the guys like Lucas Rumball, for example, is the open side flanker, and as we kind of mentioned earlier, has a lot of breakdown steals and stuff. Those guys are generally the players that you want involved in those rucks, and typically are really good at stealing the ball back. Also have to be like really good tacklers. Number 8, the only player in the forwards that's allowed to like pick up the ball from the scrum, from the back of the scrum. You generally want those guys to be really powerful ball carriers. And yeah, that about sums up the forwards. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but I guess that's the gist of the simplest way to kind of explain what everybody sort of does. I feel like we want to do this quick, but this to explain every position requires.
Yeah, no, I understand, but yeah, we get it. So we move on to the backs now, and we start off with numbers 9 and 10. Number 9 is the scrum half. Number 10 is the fly half. And they have interesting positions. So the scrum half gets his name from feeding the ball into the scrum. They also, when a player is tackled, they move the ball back. It was normally the scrum half that picks it up, passes it out, gets the ball going again. So they can really dictate the pace of a game. They can speed it up, slow it down. And they normally paired with the fly half. So when the match kicks off, it's normally a number 10 that gets the ball going. And that is the fly half. They're able to govern the attack and defense of the forwards. They're able to relay the attack plan to the scrum half. And they're called scrum half, fly half. They're known as the half backs. Okay, then we move on to the wingers. These are numbers 11 and 14. 11 for the left wing, 14 for the right wing. And both usually stay near the touch lines, and they are there to finish off attacking plays or form the last line of defense. As such, they are very quick players. The wing is the narrowest area between the touchline and other players. That's where the name originates from. Then we go on to 12. I know I've said 11 and 14. We're now going back to 12 for the inside center. So they remain near the fly half, and that's because they're able to assist and commit to both attacking and defensive play. All centers, but especially inside centers, they'll need to be able to run and pass and tackle often. So, very strong players. Think of Jonathan Joseph, George North, those kind of guys. Then we have outside center. So they're the faster of the centers. Sometimes they're wingers that have moved, put on a bit more muscle, become centers instead. They're a bit further back from the fly half of the inside center. This allows them to carry more momentum into carries and into tackles. They can also run dummy lines as well, and that can really confuse the opposition and give you an opening to score tries. Now we move on to 15. That's the fullback. So Lee Halfpenny, that kind of guy. The fullback remains at the back of the game, hence the name, and they act as a sweeper. They'll collect long kicks from the opposition. They'll help launch attacks. They have to cover a lot of area in defense as well. So when you take the fullback, which is 15, and the wingers, which are 14 and 11, you form the back line. Then we move on to replacements. Now, in most international competitions and MLR competitions, there is 8 replacements on the bench. 16 to 18, they are the front row replacements. It is the law within the game that each team must be able to feed a replacement for a front row player at the first time of asking. So if a prop or a hooker has an injury and needs to come off, the referee will say we need to have another one come in to ensure the scrum continues. And so 16 to 18 are the first players that have to be designated as front row replacements. The remaining numbers, 19 to 23, these can be decided at the discretion of a team's coaching staff. So you may sometimes hear coaches doing a 4-4 split on the bench or a 5-3 split on the bench. So when they're referring to that, they're saying that the first number are forwards on the bench, and the second number are backs on the bench. So, so as I said, you can have split of 4 forwards, 4 backs, 5 forwards, 3 backs. But it is 8 players, but 16 to 18 must be front row replacements.
See, I always kind of found that rule interesting because I think it's the only sport that does it, right? Where it's like you have to have the backup front row guys. Like I said, like if you run out of front row guys or there's not enough for whatever reason, then like you have to go to uncontested scrums after because it becomes a safety issue. Whereas like no other sport has that, right? Like baseball, if you run out of pitchers, the third baseman pitches. Like hockey, if you run out of goalies, you can call an emergency backup goalie down. It's obviously
the Zamboni driver, get him on.
Zamboni driver, yeah, which is the best rule in sports. But there are also games where it's like there's been teams in a high level hockey games where it's like the emergency backup goalie has been another player on the roster, like a healthy scratch guy or something, right? So right, or you got to play without a goalie, right? If nothing's available, if you don't have an emergency, nothing's available, then you play without a goalie, right? And it's like, football, if all your quarterbacks get hurt, hopefully you got a running back that can throw. Like there's nothing really quite like it in any other sport. It's interesting.
Yeah, very unique. If you'd like to learn more about the laws of the greatest game, you can do so on the World Rugby website. And as the Rugby World Cup continues, or begins, I should say, we'll be talking about more of the laws, especially as they come up in the games. And also when we get to the new MLR season, we'll be talking about the laws specific to MLR. But now it is time to focus on the preview of the Rugby World Cup taking place in New Zealand, originally meant to be in 2021, now being held in 2022. So the tournament is in New Zealand. This is the first Southern Hemisphere country to host a Women's Rugby World Cup and the first Rugby World Cup in New Zealand since the men's in 2011. So it would have been a great occasion to have 10 years on having the Women's World Cup. Obviously, things beyond anyone's control meant that it's now being held in 2022. And we have 12 nations taking part, and there will be 3 pools of 4 teams. Each team will play the other ones in a round-robin competition format. The top 2 teams from each pool will advance to the elimination round, along with the 2 highest placed third teams across the pools. That leaves a total of 8 teams. They will then be ranked, and they will compete in the quarterfinals. Winners of the quarterfinals will progress to the semifinals. Losers of the semifinals will compete for the 3rd place match, with the winners of the semifinals set to compete in the Women's Rugby World Cup. And while the cup doesn't have a name, I think it should be named after USA Women's Rugby legend Kathy Flores, who is also a recent addition to the World Rugby Hall of Fame. So I think it should be called the Flores Cup, and that is how I shall be referring it to the rest of the competition and every time going forward.
Okay. Does it really not have a name?
It doesn't have a name.
We need to work. We do need to work on that. We need to work on that.
Yeah, and considering that there's actual record of Kathy Flores being involved in women's rugby, I think it has a better claim to being named after her than the William Webb Ellis Cup. But that's just me.
Well, just call it the DeGoody Cup because her name's going to be on it anyways.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of DeGoody and the country she is leading, Canada, they are going to be in Pool B, and they will be facing Italy, Japan, and the USA. So it's quite an interesting pool. So Canada is currently ranked as 3rd in the world, Japan 13th, USA 6th, and Italy 5th. So Canada's still at the top of that pool, but it's not guaranteed. It's a close competition, having 5th and 6th in the world as well. So Derek,
they got this too.
What?
They got this.
Of course they've got this, but the question is, how much have they got this?
No, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Yeah, I mean obviously it's I think like the USA game is obviously a big one just because it's Canada USA and it's always big. Um when I remember like how we reacted to that when we got the pool draw, just because like this is the best pool draw that has ever happened for any international tournament. Like it's just rivalry. There's a rivalries in every single pool. It's amazing. Um,
The only issue for me, and this is just for personal preference, is that in Pool A is New Zealand, Australia, Wales, and Scotland,
yeah.
and Pool C is England, France, South Africa, and Fiji. And if you could swap South Africa and Fiji for Wales and Scotland, you'd basically have a rugby championship pool, or as close as you can get. And
That's boring though. Part of the World Cup is you see teams play everybody.
Yeah, but then again, any game at the World Cup is going to be like bigger than other ones.
Yeah.
As well. So make of
but
that work.
Yeah, as you just said though, like England and France in Pool C, and then you got New Zealand, Australia, Pool A. I mean Wales and Scotland, that's still a Six Nation thing too.
Yeah.
Italy and Japan, I'm sure we can fabricate some reason why they can hate each other for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Because I genuinely don't know. South Africa and Fiji. It's like, you know what? Whoever wins this game's better at sevens too. We'll find a way to make everybody hate each other, and just have rivalries across the board.
Well, Fiji, it's their inaugural women's World Cup, so congratulations to them. But so let's go over Pool A, and I want you to give me your top 3 teams that you think will make it through. So we have host New Zealand, who are ranked 2nd, Australia 7th, Wales 9th, and Scotland 10th.
I'm gonna go New Zealand, Australia, Scotland, Wales.
Oh, okay. All right, interesting. I think Scotland will form an upset. Well, it does seem that. Well, the thing is that
I've watched you be disappointed by Wales enough in your life to not trust this.
That is fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, the opening fixture has Australia, New Zealand, and Wales, Scotland. So it does seem to be that whoever wins that game will finish 3rd in the pool.
That's a good start to the tournament.
Yeah.
What a way to start.
And in Pool C, we have England, 1st in the world, France, 4th, let's say Russia, Republic of South Africa is 11th, and Fiji is 21st.
I mean, I think that one's pretty much in the way that you read it. I mean, England is the Red Roses are the team to beat. Like, if you know what I mean, like you kind of go into this tournament. I know it's in New Zealand, and I know like the Black Ferns are obviously going to have that level of expectation too. But it's literally like, with how dominant England has been over everyone, like if they don't win this tournament, it's disappointing for them.
Yeah.
Like 2nd place is disappointing or whatever. Every other country, if you finish 2nd, like you might be psyched. Like, I mean, as much as like, you
can be
like,
psyched.
Yeah, exactly. Like obviously you'd probably be disappointed if you lost, but like everyone else would probably be like, happy with the way they performed. It's like England's been massacring people, and then they're clearly the best team going into this, so it'll be it shall be interesting. But yeah, I think this is a pretty straightforward pool. Like you said, Fiji's first World Cup too, so it's this one seems a little easy to predict, which of course means South Africa's going to win. So
all right, so and Pool B, as we mentioned, Canada, USA, Italy, and Japan.
So this is kind of a tough one, right? Because Italy had that kind of surprise shock win over France. Thank you. Earlier this week, right? And so I mean, Canada's the top for sure. I feel like Canada's the top, Japan's bottom.
Yeah.
And man, whoever wins between USA and Italy. I think, I'm going to pick USA just because I'm going to pick USA as 2 because I really want that last game between Canada and USA to mean a lot.
Okay.
Or whatever. Right. So I'm going to go with Yeah, I'll go Canada, USA, Italy, Japan, I guess, in that pool.
All right. So you said that third places are going to be for A is going to be Scotland, B is going to be Italy, and C is going to be South Africa. Which are the two that you think will make it to the semi-final? Sorry, quarterfinals. Getting ahead of myself.
Let's go. Let's go Italy and let me see pool C for a second. Let's go Italy, Scotland.
Now, this is the thing. I think it would be Italy and South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because Wales and Scotland will be up against New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah.
And both of those teams will be, but we want to win, but we also want to finish higher in these rankings. So we're going to, destroy Wales and Scotland and make them have a much lower point differential.
Yeah.
And that's going to cost them their
place. I agree. So is point difference what's determining? Because I'm assuming all these teams that are going to finish third are going to be like 1 and 3 or 1 and 2.
Yeah.
All the teams that finish third.
Well, I think it's point differential. I mean, it's like tries for.
So it's point differential.
Points against.
What's England going to do to South Africa though? A point differential.
I don't think we know, but I think as well. Well, the thing is, I think that against England, with the exception of France, both South Africa and Fiji are going to have a lot of points shipped against them. But then I can also see New Zealand shipping a lot of points against Wales and Scotland as well.
Yeah. I think I'm realizing, like, in this conversation, man, I'm really excited for this tournament.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see the Canadian team play. But man, I really wish I knew more about women's rugby in other countries to talk about this way more in depthly.
Well,
I feel like it deserves it. But
I think we're on the precipice of professional women's rugby, and
it does. Yeah.
So this feels like the Men's World Cup in 1999. Of so much has happened since the last World Cup that we may be seeing something. Yeah. We may even be seeing similar case of Australia winning this World Cup as well. Yeah. But it seems as though this is the start of something big.
Yeah,
and then when the World Cup comes to England in 2025 and there's 16 teams taking part, and more nations are saying that we're gonna have a number of our players on professional contracts. I know, for example, Scotland have temporary contracts for the World Cup. New Zealand, obviously England, France as well have turned professional as well. We may say that Canada, the USA, even Italy, I think, are on the verge of turning professional as well, as the Six Nations gathers more heat. I mean, the WXV is set to start next year as well, which will get more women's rugby out there, with the Pacific Four series as well. So, I think we're, at the genesis of a new age of women's rugby, and it feels great.
And I think it does. I mean, I just, I said, I'm excited for those Squidge rugby videos that are going to drop to give everybody some of the insight into it. But I think it's also it's great that these games are all going to be on TSN too. Right.
I think it's
decent.
The Canada games are going to be on a TSN channel. And the other ones are going to be on
streaming
TSN.ca or the TSN app.
Either way, it's great that it's on a major network in Canada, and then people are gonna have access to it, which I think is awesome. And hopefully, I just hope everybody gets behind the Canadian team and see some extra hopefully some extra media coverage and stuff of it. And obviously, the further they go in the tournament, I'm sure that'll increase more and more as they go on.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And so all the best to Canadian women. We'll be cheering you on from coast to coast to coast, and hoping that you can lift the Kathy Flores Cup, as I'm now calling it. All right. Well, that is the end of the pod. And so, if you're looking to watch rugby, well, we've just mentioned it, haven't we? The Rugby World Cup will be available on TSN. That a few early fixtures, but fortunately, because it is Thanksgiving weekend, you can stay up late on the Sunday and watch Canada women take on Japan, and that will be at 10:15 p.m. Eastern time. And as we said, on TSN, so make sure to watch it there. If you're looking to keep up with the Premiership and the URC, you can watch it on Sportsnet. So if you enjoyed listening to this episode of the podcast, you can listen to many of our others, either on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Anchor FM. And if you like watching our faces and would like to see any extra video content, you can do so on our YouTube channel at Rouge Rugby. In fact, you can find us across all social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can the fine people find you?
At Reset the Jet across all social media platforms.
And you can find me across social media platforms, mainly Twitter and Instagram, at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, Derek, we're nearly here. We're nearly back at another Rugby World Cup. I'm looking forward to talking about it next week. Thank you for joining me, and thanks to you all for joining us for another episode of Real Canadian Rugby on the Rouge Rugby podcast. We hope you can join us again next time.